Welcome to Trading the Close on this Monday. I'm Toni Valliere with Verified Investing, and here's what's making headlines today. Apple and Google stocks surge over talks to potentially have Google's Gemini power iPhone AI features. Homebuilder confidence hits highest level since July as mortgage rates soften. The average 30-year fixed rate fell from 6.88% to 6.74% last week. Tesla stock rises following price hikes for some of its Model Y electric vehicles, and Pepsi stock also rises after Morgan Stanley upgrades the stock to top pick, citing undervaluation and positive inflection in international results. Let's get a check of where things stand. Just minutes before the closing bell, saw a lot of green almost across the board. We've got the Dow up 87 points, 0.23%. The Nasdaq up 169 points, up just over a percent. We've got the S&P 500 up 31 points, 0.62%. Oil is up just over $1. We've got gold up over $4, but Bitcoin in the red right now, down over $1,300, 1.95%. Let's bring in Chief Market Strategist Gareth Soloway. I've been with you all day today. This is a big day for me. I came in just to observe because I really want to get in, be able to read the charts clearly and know what I'm doing and start trading. And there was a lot of action. It was very quick and a lot of positive action today.
Yeah, and folks, it's so cool that Toni wants to get into trading, and she came to the trading floor today, and it was a pretty active morning of trading opportunities, and we're talking day trading here. So it was great to have you see that and kind of understand that yes, we make money, but it's not all easy, right?
That's what I was just going to say. I saw a lot of great moves today, but watching it that closely, I realized I still have a lot to learn. And you keep it so simple here that I feel like I understand. But when you're in the moment, so it really is a privilege for our members to be able to follow along and understand. But really take me through, because I was focusing on specific stocks today. What's going on with the S&P?
So the S&P today, we started with an upside move, right? So they opened the market up. You can see the big gap here. This is Friday's close. This is where we opened today. And then it was kind of this slow grind sideways to lower. But what's interesting here, the last 10-minute candle, and we're still, a minute away from closing here, we are seeing some selling going on here. And again, my question is we have this big NVIDIA event after the close starting at 4 o'clock. And my guess is smart money's probably taking money off the table and selling, because a lot of times the excitement brings the retail crowd in, but then the smart money sells into the news and it becomes a sell the news event. So it'd be interesting to see in the after hours what NVIDIA does. But what we do know is that it was generally up today, and that helps the market stay buoyant as long as NVIDIA is up. And again, NVIDIA has been the market. It's been the market leader now for months. So that's an interesting little tidbit right there. And again, we're just about a minute and a half from close. Couple other things, we saw yields continue to push up today. This is the 10-year yield. We are into resistance here, so big resistance, but this is very pivotal, and we have the Fed on Wednesday afternoon. And my thinking is they're going to keep the yield right here, and when they announce, it's either going to go like this, or we're going to see this retraction back down to the downside. But again, you were just mentioning mortgage rates starting to come down. My guess is after this move, they'll start to creep up again, because we're seeing the 10-year moving up pretty substantially from 4% back to 4.33. That's a big move on the 10-year in just about 5 to 6 trading days. So yields are moving up here. Again, generally that's not a good thing for the economy, but maybe the Fed will cushion it a little on Wednesday. But I think the thinking is that the Fed is in a tight spot. Inflation's starting to creep up. The jobs numbers are still good, but again, how do they really cut rates substantially like the market wants with inflation upticking? So that's something to definitely keep an eye on. So that's where we are in the markets today. What hot stocks do we want to go over today?
Well, I watched you guys follow Tesla was a big one, NVIDIA, I know Apple, Google was another one.
Yeah, so you can see here Tesla's been kind of pounded to the downside. It's getting a little bit of a reprieve on the news today. In the bigger picture, when I look at this, I say, okay, it's getting a bounce here, but it's not like it was at major support. So for me as a trader, as an investor, like a swing trader, I'm not buying yet, even with this up move. And it doesn't mean it can't go further up, but I want to be a buyer on support. Like I want to be on the floor and buying there, so I have that cushion underneath me. Here, if I'm buying at this point, yeah, I could make some money, but it could also pull the rug on me and come back down to the downside. So an interesting one on that one. SMCI was a big one to trade today. This thing was up like $70 at one some point. Then it was down over 100. It did get a bounce back to this 1,000 even number. But the thing that sticks out to me in this chart, there's some gap fills. And this level here, I got to imagine from this gap where it gapped up to here, this difference here has to be filled at some point. So I got to believe that we're coming at least back into this level over the next couple days. And if NVIDIA doesn't really shock the market with something amazingly new, you're going to see people starting to sell into it. It's kind of like, okay, we knew they were introducing this new chip. We already knew that, but what's next? It's always about what's next for stocks to keep the momentum going to the upside.
Otherwise, you think this is coming down a little quicker?
Yeah, I think this will come down. Again, you can already see the selling pressure today as it was trying to hold up. And again, it's just had such a massive move. You know, this was, you know, just going back to the beginning of the year, there was what, $300, $250 stock goes to $1,250. It's just a normal reaction when, you know, you think about a rubber band, right? You pull that rubber band tighter and tighter and tighter. At some point, it snaps back down a little bit. And that's what happens with charts. So you get these big moves to the upside. At some point, it has to at least snap back to some sort of technical support down here. So yeah, some really interesting stuff out there. Obviously, we should touch on Bitcoin. Bitcoin's down a little today, just a tiny bit. We are back below the $69,000 level, which was the major high. That was the all-time high from 2021. That's now become my level. So if we are below it, I'm more bearish. If we're above it, I'm more on the bullish side. And it's kind of this pivot point back and forth right at that level. The one thing I'll mention here before we get going here is just look at the weekly. This is my determining factor. This trend line represents the high from 2021. If I zoom out, you can see where that comes from. So this high here. And what I'm focusing on is a weekly close, which is Sunday night. Sunday nights is the candle, the weekly candle closes. Look at last week, it closed below. This week, it also closed below as well. So both weeks, it closed below. We haven't had a weekly close above this line. So that's what I'm going to be watching here over the next week or two. Do we get a weekly close? If we do, then I think that's bullish and we're going higher. If not, I honestly think you're due for, I mean, look at this move. I think a retrace to about this level right in here is likely going to happen.
And I've heard you mention that before. It's not the first time. Real quick, can I have you bring up copper? Just because we're starting to see that in the news lately.
Absolutely.
And we don't usually check on that. We check on gold, oil, of course, Bitcoin, but
Copper's had a remarkably good move here. And I think this is the kicker for copper is that number one, oh, we're not seeing copper yet. There we go. There's copper. So if we look at this is just over the last week or so, copper's had this big move from underneath $4 to over $4. And I think what's going on here, a couple things. Number one, the U.S. is still, the economy is still not heading towards recession. People still believe in the narrative of the soft landing or no landing. So that's good because demand for copper in the U.S. should stay strong if that's the case. And I say if that's the case because I'm not a personal believer that we're going to avoid a recession, but that's the way the market feels right now, so that's fair. And then the other side is what's driving copper here is that China is stimulating. So they're pumping so much money into their economy, and they're a huge consumer of copper, obviously, for building. And so you're starting to see that okay, U.S. isn't going to be into recession. That's what the market thinks. And then China's starting to speed up. It creates this movement to the upside. And again, we've seen a lot of these metals starting to move up as well.
Exactly.
But again, I'm skeptical just because, again, I think China might speed up, but I do think eventually the U.S. slows down more and more, which could offset this run. But it's an interesting market out there. You have a lot of moving pieces.
And some would say we already are in a recession.
That's
so
right.
Everybody has their perspective. We appreciate yours very much. Gareth, thank you so much. And remember, you can always catch Gareth navigate the charts ahead of the opening bell. That is every single day at 9 a.m. right here on the Verified YouTube channel. I have another special guest today. He is Kenneth Suna. He is a self-taught trader and trading educator with hundreds of thousands of followers on social media. Perhaps you follow him yourself. If not, you are likely to after this interview. Kenneth, I want to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for joining us here on Trading the Close.
Hi, Tony. Thanks for having me.
You have an incredible background and a story that I do feel is quite relatable, and maybe not every detail, but it is relatable. In fact, our own verified trader, Dr. B, has a somewhat similar story. So can you sum up your background, your story, and tell us what led you to get into trading and doing what you do now?
Sure. I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. When I was a little kid, my mom and my grandma were very interested in investing. So it was something I kind of always knew about. And I didn't really want to go to college when I was, a senior in high school. I really wanted to be a professional wrestler. And luckily, I had a mom who supported me, even though it was terrifying. And graduated high school, went to a pro wrestling school, broke my back on the very first day, and did minimum wage jobs for a very, very long time, and didn't really know what I wanted to do or who I was or what I wanted to, be when I grew up outside of pro wrestling. And I was always kind of very interested in the stock market and investing. And when I was working at a gym, some of the regulars who would come in would talk about the stocks that they were trading. And I would sort of eavesdrop and then go home and be really reckless with my hard-earned money and buy whatever they were talking about at the gym. And I'd lose a lot of money doing that. And so I read a couple books. I taught myself how to trade. And then over the last couple of years, I had a bunch of friends start asking me and showing interest in the market. So I thought, well, I'll make a video and I'll put it on YouTube, and it'll just be for friends. It's just going to be for my friends. It was bad. I wasn't good at, being on camera. And that's sort of how it started. And then I had this video on YouTube, and I thought, well, there's a lot of good information here, and it's private. It's just for my friends. Maybe I should make it public. So that's when I got on social media.
And it's soared. It's really taken off dramatically. I mean, you have hundreds of thousands of followers. You're on multiple platforms. So how did you decide, or how do you decide on the stocks that you invest in, and which ones are you currently trading? And I know you're not day trading anymore necessarily, because you're really focused on educating others. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've been a full-time stock trader for the last 13 years, and I've been investing for over 20. And the way that I found the stocks that I would invest in way back when was I would look at the companies that I knew, used, and loved. So I was a big pro wrestling fan. So when WWE, which used to be WWF, went public, it was 1999. So I was on the phone with my mom's stockbroker saying, I got to get it. And the same thing happened for Meta and Netflix. Any company I used and I loved, I was like, I should obviously be investing in this. If I love it enough to shop at the company and use what they're selling, I should also invest. My trading a little different. I would look at charts and I would look at technical analysis to make my decisions on what to trade. But my most recent investment would be Kava. I bought it on IPO day, which I normally don't do. There's only 3 stocks that I ever bought on IPO day: WWE, Meta, and Kava. But that's a place that I know, use, and love. And so my old approach, or my old method for finding investments was, oh, Kava's coming public. I love Kava. I'm going to invest. And yeah, my trades, it's a little bit less these days. I think Spirit Airlines, I jumped in on a very, very quick trade a couple months ago when they were having some issues. And then SoundHound a few weeks ago was my last one as well. But generally, yeah, these days, not a lot of trading.
A lot of educating. So let's talk about that. What are the biggest mistakes that investors make when getting started trading?
I think the biggest mistake that a lot of new investors and new traders make is they listen to strangers on the internet. And so that's why the whole premise of my channel is I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to tell you what to trade. We're not copying trades or investments. It's all education based. So really, not listening to strangers is huge. I made that mistake, and I equate like listening to strangers at my gym to listening to strangers on TikTok today. A lot of people don't really know what they're doing. And another tip I guess I would have would be not having a plan. I think a lot of new investors and traders make the same mistakes of not having a plan, especially when it comes to trading, not just for taking profits, but on when to take losses as well. And I guess maybe the last one would be only put in what you're willing to lose, especially if you're new. New traders tend to do things the opposite. They come to social media and they go, oh, I'm going to get really, really rich, really, really fast. I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to buy a big amount of shares, and then they get wrecked. So pace yourself.
Yeah, if only it was that easy, right? Okay, what are the 3 keys to being a successful trader? What are you really teaching people that they should be doing?
Yeah, so the first one I think would be to really find what works best for you. So my approach is going to be different from every other stock trader. And I know it can be very overwhelming, especially when you go on TikTok or Instagram, and there are so many content creators, and they're all trying to vie for your attention. And this method is best, and that method is best. So study, pace yourself. Like I talked about a second ago, pace yourself. Watch a couple videos before you start trading. Everyone thinks that they're just going to have a Lamborghini tomorrow. But really kind of pace yourself. Don't compare to other traders. I think comparing to other traders is a huge detriment. We could both go in on the same trade at the same time on the same day and have vastly different outcomes. So really kind of just, focus on yourself. it's like a sport, but where you're the only person. It's like bodybuilding. You're competing against yourself. You're not on a field, playing against the other team. So just really focus on yourself. And revenge trading is a big no-no. If you lose a lot of money on a trade, I think a lot of new traders are really their reaction or their impulse is, oh, I lost 200 on this trade. I have to go make 200, or I have to make 400 on this trade. And then they start thinking kind of recklessly. So really important, pace yourself. Don't revenge trade. Even when you take a profit, close your laptop, take the day off. Don't think, oh, I'm picking up momentum. I'm going to start trading recklessly now to make more money. That's usually when problems happen.
Yeah, I'm learning. You have to have patience and the right mindset. Easier said than done. Kenneth, where can people go to find out more information on you and your services? And I know they're free. They're all online, right?
Yeah, this is kind of why I built my channel. I noticed when I first started that there were a lot of people really out here trying to sell, and there's nothing wrong with selling courses and information, but there was no alternative to that for, I think, the people who need the education the most are usually the ones who can't afford to hire someone or pay for a one-on-one. So I started on Instagram, and I'm still there. My username is Trade Invest Simplify. The Simplify came because I'm a minimalist, so I was all about simplifying my life. But then a couple years ago, someone said, "Oh, I get your username. You're taking complex things like trading and investing, and you're simplifying it." And I was like, "Sure, that's where the username came from." And I'm on Instagram. YouTube is just my name. It's Kenneth Suna, and TikTok, which is my largest platform, is also Trade Invest Simplify.
Well, let's hope that one stays around for a while.
No kidding.
Kenneth, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it very much. All the best to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Toni.
And thank you for joining Trading the Close as well. We will be back tomorrow, so make it a great rest of the day.